So I'm in between folds, and I'm going to take a look at some of the other bakery work that's happening right now. These are rolled out croissant sheets. This one is a savory pinwheel, so these will be cut up into individual pinwheels, and what's in between is something very true to Amanda's cultural roots. This is called a za'atar pinwheel. So it's made out of a za'atar spice blend, which is a Mediterranean blend of thyme, sumac, sesame seeds, and some other herbs. It's really traditional in Middle Eastern cuisine. The most traditional use of za'atar is actually on like flat pita type breads, where you spread it just like this with olive oil and eat it that way. But we actually have sort of incorporated this into our sourdough methods. So we make za'atar sourdough sometimes, but we can also do it in a savory pastry. So our croissant dough is merged with a layer of za'atar and oil, and then rolled up and then cut into these pinwheels and proofed like so. And so once these are baked, they're savory pinwheels. We can take a look at some of the other pastries that we have going on, and I can check the proofing room right now. So we are currently in the process of proofing all of our pastries for the weekend. And so it's really important that this room comes up to 80 degrees and 80% humidity. So what I like to do on Friday is just check this place a bunch of times. So we've been coming up in temp. Actually, we just turned this on to warm within the last hour. So it started in the low 40s and it's now approaching 70 degrees. So in about 30 minutes or so, this room will come fully up to temp. There's some humidifiers in here giving some moisture, and then all of our different types of pastries. So these are going to be our lemon marmalade Danishes. So right before the bake, we're going to dimple a center in here and top them with a marmalade, which will bake with them. It's really nice. It's a homemade marmalade made with local citrus, and you can see from, if you've looked at any of the garden footage that we have, I have an abundance of citrus growing in my yard. There's just an abundance of citrus in this area. Our sourdough croissants, of course. A variant on our sourdough croissant is this everything croissant. So this is an everything bagel mix. There's a bunch of different spices. If you're not familiar with everything spice blend, you can look up everything bagel spice blend and see what's all in it. There's some garlic, there's some sesame, some other nice things. This is our take on an almond croissant. Oftentimes almond croissants are twice baked and caramelized. In our case, we actually use frangipan this way, and we par bake the frangipan so it doesn't seep out. This is another version of a pinwheel, except probably a little bit more familiar. We call this a morning bun. It's a cinnamon roll made on croissant dough. So cinnamon sugar in the pinwheel. It's delicious. One of the crowd favorites, to be sure. And then if I can get back there, I can find one more variant. This is all stuff that you can do on croissant dough. So here we have some braided croissant dough, and in the case of these braids, sometimes, so when we originally did this product, it was kind of from the ends of the sheets, the scraps, if you will, the perfectly good scraps that just simply weren't big enough to make a pastry out of. We braid them, and then we top this with rosemary and sea salt, and those are our rosemary twists. Now we have too much demand for those rosemary twists to just rely on scraps, so we do make some dedicated batches just for the rosemary twists because people love them. But that's a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes in our pastry world. I'm taking this to the next step of completion. I've got this marked out at the thickness that I need, and so now I'm going to I'm using a serrated knife to cut through this. Find it to be the easiest way of cutting through this for the pinwheels. And so I'm getting even cuts because what I did was I took our tool called a bicicleta and just marked it out. So there's like micro lines that you might not be able to see that tell me where to cut. And so pinwheels are kind of nice. They can be a little bit messy, but not any worse than anything else in here. Baking in general can be a little bit messy. That's why we wear aprons. So now that I've run through and cut these, the last bit, you could definitely bake these ends off. You're not going to get as big of a pastry, but if you wanted to save these ends for your bakers or for your home consumption, they'd still be delicious. So what I'm going to do with this now is take the end and put it on the bottom so that the pastry doesn't unfurl, and then I'm going to put 12 per tray. They're not a flavor profile that a lot of people around here are familiar with, unless they happen to be familiar with Middle Eastern cuisine or are of Middle Eastern heritage, like Amanda. But it's really a flavor profile that most everybody can get behind. I haven't met a whole lot of people that don't enjoy it, and to that extent, it's really nice to be able to merge the culture around baking sourdough with some of our cultural roots. So we've also done some Polish stuff as well, but this is one that we just regularly go to. A little over a year ago, I was making a very traditional Polish dessert called Makoviet, which is a poppy seed roll. I haven't actually gone as far as to try that on croissant dough, but that could be interesting. In general, where Poland comes in is there's just more artisan sourdough bread in Poland than there is in Lebanon on the whole, where most of the bread eaten in that part of the world is flatbread. So when we merge these sort of Middle Eastern flavors with the European influence of wheat artisan breads, it is in many ways a merging of our cultural roots. So that completes the za'atar. I'm going to go ahead and put these scraps on as well. Might as well provide some snacks to our PM crew that's going to be baking these. And since these are going into the oven tonight, I'm going to make sure that they join these right away so that they can get going. Although, since I'm starting these a couple hours after the others, it's also important that I indicate to my team that these are starting a little bit behind the others. So that piece of tape on the speed rack is just so that I can put down a start time on these, and that way that just gives my next crew that comes in to finish the work tonight an indicator of where to start with the bake. They can have a better idea of judging the pastry. Of course, they're all skilled enough to just judge the proofing level without times, but any indicator that I can give them that sort of helps is favorable. So labeling things, keeping things orderly and organized is important, especially as you're putting more and more products out. So I'm moving on to the sheeter here, and I've got fully laminated croissant dough. So now the next step with this croissant dough is to have it rolled out to make more pastry. So far I've made the 2 za'atar that I have. I need to make one more of the pinwheel type, the morning buns. I need 1 pain au chocolat, 2 of the marmalade sheets, and 2 sheets of rosemary twists. So I'm going to start with the easier ones because I'm in the middle of trying to also shape bread. And so we will do the chocolate, and we will do one of the lemon marmalades. So I'm first taking this through to match the width of the sheeter. Typically I overshoot a little bit because if you overshoot a little, then you can unwind some of the tension that's been built up, which is really a process that you need to do throughout the lamination process, is get rid of extra tension in your dough. If you have too much tension in croissant dough, unlike the bread dough, once you get to the table, you cut your croissant and it shrinks, and that's not what I want. Some buildup of air there. It's beautiful looking croissant dough. And what I can do now is roll it up. I'm at my final thickness. So if I start that roll, it's pretty cool to roll it up that way. At least I find those type of things entertaining. So you might notice on the table that this has a slight bowing. You don't want that. That's a sign that there's some tension built up. And so what you can do is simply release that tension that's all going this way in the direction that the dough is being stretched. And that way you can ensure that when you cut these out, they don't start to shrink. I'm going to go ahead and add a second block of croissant dough to the table. Oops. Throughout the week, we actually keep this side cold and that side warm. But then once we get to Friday, we have to switch because we have so many pastries. So now this side's cold. There's my next one. This one is going to be rolled out a little bit differently because of what I'm doing with it. So these are going to be those lemon marmalade Danishes. I'm going to roll them out thinner than the croissant dough that I just did for chocolate croissant. And so you'll notice that it takes up more space on the table. And I'll actually get a better yield out of it too. But you know, each pastry has its own specifications. The Danishes are going to have plenty of size. And actually, by making them thinner, there's going to be more filling to pastry, which for a Danish is what I'm looking for. With the chocolate croissants, I really like them to be large in size, and so those we do a little bit differently. But these really I'm going to take down to about as thin as I've ever been able to roll out sourdough croissant dough. I'm very excited about something that's coming up though. Now that we're moving into a building, we have the ability to work with a food distributor, which generally we don't do a whole lot of, and we'll continue not to do a whole lot of because we like to source a lot of our ingredients locally. But there aren't very impressive butter sources locally. There's some local dairies, but the butter that they're producing is not really suitable for our needs. So for the longest time, we've been buying a European style butter just from a restaurant supply store, and it's okay. But now that we have a food distributor, we are getting to work with a smaller Wisconsin-based farm that has a history actually back in Europe. So that family has been dairy farmers since they immigrated about 100 years ago, and they still use their old school traditions that they carried over from Europe. The butter is a significantly better quality than the one that we have now, which is significantly better quality than what you can find at the supermarket. But that new butter is likely to give us some substantial performance gains on our pastry. And so you'll notice, just because I rolled this a lot thinner, how much more space it takes up on the table. In fact, it's hanging over there, but I haven't untensioned it yet, so it's not going to hang out off the table very much longer. You'll see how much this comes in as I release tension. So there we go. We've done so many different measurements on our croissants over the years that I can't keep them straight. Am I in 2021 or am I back in 2019? We've tried all kinds of different sizes and shapes, and so I never am quite sure where we're at these days. Don't quite have enough width for, oh whoops, that's why this is different. I marked this off as though it'd be chocolate croissants, and it's not. That's why my measurement didn't quite jive. These actually have to be 4x4, and that's the nice thing about not cutting them, because it's still fine to recover. I'm just going to try to do a deeper cut now so that I don't get confused by my other lines. The nice thing about Danish squares is, at least on the front end, they're really easy. All you got to do is cut these out now and tray them up. Although they're not easy all the way through, there's a lot more to do around the bake time with these, where we have to top them and then watch them, and they take more time to complete. Whereas some of the other ones, like the chocolates, they might be marginally more work right now, but once they get to the oven, they just need egg wash and done. So I've got that all marked off. I'm going to cut it once I get this one marked off. So on these chocolates, I am doing this type of a number. Now these bars of chocolate are 70%, so they're quite dark. Not everybody's into dark chocolate, but we're of the opinion that there is plenty of sweet pastries to go around. And we like to create something a little different, something a little bit more balanced in flavor. I think that there's still a nice amount of sweetness in our chocolate croissants, but the pastry itself has about 8 grams of sugar, and the chocolate also has minimal sugar. So this type of pastry you could enjoy every day if you wanted to, and wouldn't harm you. Now the temperature in this room is nice and cool. It's in the 60s Fahrenheit. I'm not sure that I would be so confident to put so much croissant dough on the table at once, just working on it solo. If it was very warm in here, this dough will perform very differently if it's warm, and it's pretty important to keep it cold through the process, because it'll start to proof, and once it starts to proof and expand, it's harder to roll up. The butter will start to melt. Just kind of a nightmare scenario. You really want the dough to be somewhat cold until it's ready to go to its final proof. This particular pastry has definitely been our historical bestseller on our menu, although it was dethroned last year, and I imagine it will be dethroned this year, and that's mainly because it's no longer our sweetest pastry on the menu. And as you can imagine, a lot of the people that find us at the market are attracted to those morning buns or to some of those sweeter options that we provide. But this one still ranks up there, and the people that fell in love with it come back time and time again for it. It's a pastry that I enjoy from time to time. Although I tell people that I get a lot of joy just out of making pastries now. All the pleasure that I used to get consuming one every single week back when I was just a customer, I get that plus making all of these, because the process of making pastries is incredibly technical, and when you can get it right, it's incredibly rewarding. So sourdough croissants have not been that common. I imagine that now they'll start to get more common around the world, since there's just more and more information on how to make them. But they're very rewarding when you get them right. For us, we had to learn the hard way, and it took, well, I mean, it took the original owner of Proof the whole time that he owned it. He had a couple really awesome results, but it took another year and a half after I sort of took over the baton where he left off to really nail it down. And it turned out that the temperature and humidity of the final proof were the really missing link. Along the way, I got pretty decent at laminating because for the longest time I thought that the secret was in lamination. So there's those. Next, these Danishes.